Okay. Okay, a few people started to come in. Morning, Sam.
Morning. Good morning, Kerry.
Hey, Gary.
Hi, Eileen. Good
Hi,
morning, Finn. Good morning, Richard.
good to see you, Richard.
Anybody dialing in from London? Probably slightly dampened weather from what we've had for the last couple of days. Morning, Saffron.
Morning, Sam.
You doing well?
So we'll just wait a moment to get going. Yeah, I mean, it's the weather bubble has burst, hasn't it? And so good to have David on this morning. I think it's going to be a bit of a pick-me-up from current climate today. Hi, Anish. Just wait another moment. We've got a few people joining. I don't know if you actually, next door has got a broken gutter, so I don't know if you can hear the the water cascading over the gutter. But yeah, there we go. At least it's not our gutter, I suppose. I'll probably go around and tell them a bit later. So, Richard, should we get ourselves started?
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Friday morning show. And also to those listening back, thanks for joining us. Super excited this morning to have David Smith on the show. Sorry, David Smith, MBE. David's going to be, I think this is going to be a little bit of an emotional roller coaster, this one. If you remember James Brett, I think it's a sort of a similar path that David's life has taken him on. So James is a British adaptive rower. He won gold at the 2012 Summer Paralympics. And actually, David was introduced to us by Jack Green, if you remember, an amazing guest we had a few months ago. David's also a double world champion in that sport. He's achieved amazing things, but hey, not without struggles. Back in the day, David was actually born with a club foot, and in his first 3 years, had to have his foot repeatedly broken to correct it. But he's found a lot of success in sports, in karate, sprinting, and then bobsleigh. But Jack's path has actually been massively affected by having a tumour inside his spinal cord, and we'll hear more about that. It was aggressive, embedded, affected in many ways from a health and mental well-being point of view. Had multiple operations, but has come through it with an energy, a focus, and a spirit which is quite remarkable. He's subsequently switched into cycling after 2012. He's had further surgeries. I think David probably has a unique perspective on recovery, rehabilitation, and also compassion. So I am super thrilled to have you on the show, David. It's fabulous to have you here. Thank you for coming on.
No, thank you guys for having me on. And I often, you're often asked a lot of times when I do things, people often focus on the sport and multiple sports I've done, but I often feel that my biggest lessons have come from 11 years on the cancer wards and neurological wards of hospitals, and ultimately, I guess, becoming very familiar with my own mortality. And that's definitely taught me how to live far more than sport has ever taught me. But I think both of them go very hand in hand. The lessons I learn in sport prepare me for the lessons for what I need to deal with in oncology. And what I learn in oncology actually gives me very valuable life lessons that I hope to share with you guys today. And hopefully I can bring some, I guess, insight and maybe some wisdom into this thing that we're living in and calling life, and how we try to flourish.
Yeah, well, there you go. There's a perfect teaser. So thank you again. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Richie to get us started.
Thank you, Mark. And David, look, what an absolute pleasure, honestly. And another fellow Scotsman, which is great as well. So that's perfect. David, you've already given us some hints into some of the things that you'd like to get across to us, to the audience today. But let's just let us just kick off with a bit of context, really. Can you perhaps just relay some of the key themes of your life, maybe going from the beginning all the way through? Just be lovely to hear from yourself some of the ups and downs, challenges, and circles you've been through.
Yeah, so as Mark touched on, when I was originally born, I was born with club foot, which affects 1 in 1,000 child. So my feet were sort of fused facing backwards. They were repeatedly broken and reset and put into special plaster casts and boots. And the doctors said to my parents, whatever you do, never remove those boots, because if you remove them, your child could risk losing both legs from the knees down. So I remember my parents telling me this story. It was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was in excruciating pain. And my parents were having a debate. We'll call it a debate, not an argument. They were having a debate around whether they take these boots off or not. And neither had medical knowledge, but they decided to take them off. And when they took them off, my legs were basically black from the knees down. So if they hadn't taken those boots off and listened to the doctors, I'd have lost both of my legs. So there's a little lesson in there as well that we should question every bit of knowledge that we're given, and certainly get 2 or 3 different opinions, so the doctors are not always correct. So thankfully they took those boots off, but at the same time, there's a high chance. We don't really know when the tumor grew. I wasn't diagnosed until the age of 32. So we're not entirely sure when that tumor was found. But during my first 5 years of life, I also suffered from convulsions in my sleep and almost died several times. And I was rushed to hospital, and I was misdiagnosed with epilepsy. So misdiagnosed with epilepsy meant I was put on very strong epileptic medication for the very first years of my life, which also has a huge impact on your mental health and how the brain develops. You know, we need to know in the first 7 years of life, the brain is very, very plastic. It's very like a sponge, and it really does get shaped with our values, our lessons, everything around us starts to shape who we become, and we actually live on a sort of subconscious program for the rest of our life. So those first 7 years are very, very important to brain development. And at that point, I'd gone through huge amounts of trauma. I was misdiagnosed with epilepsy. I was put on this medication, which all had a huge impact. So I suffered a lot with sort of just the ability to focus, the ability to have attention. So I struggled academically. My parents thought the best thing for me was to put me into sport. I started off in a Scottish sport called shinty, which is kind of like ice hockey and hurling. It's basically a bunch of guys chasing a little ball on a pitch, but it's very, very passionate in Scotland, and it's something that sort of forms early childhood there. So it teaches you lots of lessons about working in teams, resilience, it's a very tough sport. So when you get knocked down, you have to get yourself back up. So there's many, many lessons in resilience very early on in that sport. That spanned on to karate, and I ended up in karate, I ended up in athletics, I skied, I did water skiing in the summer. And ultimately, what I discovered about the age of 18, 19 is I actually found the Olympics. And it's not like a child where I looked at all these great athletes and was inspired to go on and become an Olympian. For me, it was something that I fell in love with, more of an inner journey. So it wasn't chasing external things for people to say, oh, this guy's an Olympian. It was more of an autotelic experience. It was coming more from within. I wanted to push my body, push my mind as hard as I could be, and actually just be the best that I could be at what I did. And eventually that led me on an Olympic path. But unfortunately, I've always seen that I've had these 2 races in life. One has been with cancer, and one has been in sport. And it's so hard to, in a lot of ways, society programs us that, we need more to be more. And the Olympic model in the UK sport model is all about winning medals. You're not enough if you don't win the medal. You're not good enough if you don't win the medal. So this continuous programming in your mind is that to be what you want to be, or what society want you to be, you need to win this medal. So you need to do more, to be more, to be this person. And actually, that's all wrong. They're not teaching you values and teaching you just how to be a good human being, and actually that what is success? Is success winning a gold medal at all cost to your mental health against all your values, or is success living by your values and flourishing in life and actually causing a ripple effect through the planet and humanity to just make better humans? For me, that's more success. And the sport model and the cancer model were very contradictory, because the cancer model, I was learning all about compassion. I was seeing mortality. I was seeing people from the age of, young kids as age of 2 or 3 year old, right up until people in their 90s, and learning lessons there that actually chasing this gold medal is almost ludicrous. because most of the people I met weren't happy, and all they kept saying to me was, well, I can't wait till the Olympics are over. I can't wait till the Olympics are over. And we were living in the future. We, as athletes, we constantly lived for this next race, for this next Olympics, and we actually really forgot to be present. So my journey in sport, although it's maybe given me rewards of world titles and Olympics, I actually almost, I was never present for them. It was stuff I really took for granted. I didn't really, I guess in a lot of ways, I wasn't alive. And I remember reading The Alchemist, and one of the strong lessons from The Alchemist was when did you realize the moment you were alive? And for me, that was when I first went onto an anesthetic table and they put the tubes into me. And just before I closed my eyes, I wasn't sure if I'd ever open my eyes again. And if I did, what would the world look like? Would I be paralyzed from the neck down? Would I need care for the rest of my life? Would I come around and just be the same as I went into it? So for me, I realized that actually the time that I felt most alive was when I was almost dead or almost about to die. And I thought, what? I need to sit with that for a minute. And what does that really mean? And it meant that I wasn't getting that in my pursuit of this medal, because even though I wanted the medal, it was actually coming from other people. So I thought I really need to sit back, look at myself and ask myself, what do I really want in life? I love sport. I love the pursuit of sport. I still do it. But for me, I think that I've been really shaped and probably evolved more as a person with my journey with cancer. And that's an ongoing journey. That's a journey that will never, ever end. I've had 4 diagnoses now. I've had 6 spinal surgeries. I've had 7 weeks of radiation. And I now, in a lot of ways, have the gift that I live my life every 6 months. So every 6 months I have a scan, I get a green light or a red light. And that can sound pretty heavy. It is pretty heavy. There's days, yesterday I had a bad day and I struggled to move yesterday. I was crying, I couldn't get out of bed. Today's a good day. So it does have ups and downs. It's not, and that's like everyone, that's like you guys as well, that it's not up all the time. It's to recognize emotions and how days we will have down days, we will have up days. What's our coping mechanism? What's our tools for that? And for me, sport has been that tool.
Wow, David, I feel like I've just been run over by a steam train.
Sorry. It's a lot to drop on at this time in the morning.
In a good way, but in a good way. I mean, there's so many things in there, and this sort of fusion of cancer and sport, and we'll come back to that, and I think we'll go a bit deeper. But I mean, it's already very clear. And by the way, I read The Alchemist many years ago, and it's a great book to read. I mean, it gives you a unique perspective, and so leads you to maybe choose a path less trodden. So I'm most interested in terms of the last period of COVID and how it's affected you by the fact that we've had a bit of a ding dong about when we could get you on the show because of your travel plans. Ding dong's the wrong word, but logistics wise, because you chose to hang out in the Jamaican bush for a period of time. So tell us about the why and the what of why you chose to do that.
Yeah, so actually when COVID came around and people got locked down initially, it's a huge trauma. And anytime we go through a trauma, we delve into what's known as the Kruger-Ross stages of grief. So the very first one is denial. And then you go through frustration, anger, and barger, and then you go to depression. And then and now we're seeing where we're coming back out now. We have to have acceptance, and then we find meaning and purpose in our life again. So when this started to happen, I was actually like, wow, this is like being paralyzed. This is exactly what it's like being paralyzed, because when you're paralyzed, you want to do all these things. You've not changed the person mentally. You still want to go here, see your friends. You want to go to work. You want to go out and do things, but you can't do it. And all of a sudden, everything's taken away from you. And then you find yourself on complete solitude on your own, really unable to do anything. So it's like your identity has been stripped from you. And that's hugely challenging as human beings, especially because we are sort of social creatures. We do like energy, and we do massively identify with what we do to who we are, which can be a little bit dangerous. So when I was paralyzed from the neck down, I lost all that. So when COVID actually came, I'd already gone through all the emotions, all the feelings. So for me, the city, I was in London at the first lockdown, it shut down. So actually what that did for me is it actually opened my life up, because I could actually leave my house and not be vulnerable. I didn't have to worry about getting attacked. I didn't have to worry about people pushing me over because I'm disabled. So I managed to get on my bike because I could still ride, and I was actually riding all around London. So for me, it was freedom, where for the world it was lockdown. I had this freedom where I could go out and do my hours exercise, ride my bike, and not worry about this vulnerability that being disabled brings to the, I guess, to the table. When the next lockdown for the winter was about to happen, I jumped on a plane and went to Jamaica and spent the whole of the winter. So I had a great winter out there. And what I did is that, again, none of us know when we're going to die. And I always say to people that, if you knew the day you were going to die, would it make you live today differently? And the answer is absolutely yes, because one of the downfalls for human beings is procrastination. And we think we've maybe got 10,000 years to live. So we'll do that tomorrow. We'll do this today. We'll do that another day. And we forget to maybe do things that really fulfill us. We get caught maybe on that treadmill and of the rat race, if you want to use that word. And we neglect things that really, really get us going and that we're passionate about. And one thing I asked a lot of the people in hospital when I was in there, what's your regrets in life? And nobody said they wish they hadn't spent more time at the beach or on the golf course or playing tennis or doing their hobbies. A lot of the people were like, wow, I wish I'd made more time for activities that really got me into flow states and really made me flourish. So one of the blessings with paralysis and cancer is that I try to use every second of every day really wisely. And when that lockdown came down, I was like, okay, I'm my partner's Jamaican, so I was like, we're going. She said to me, we're going to Jamaica. I was like, that I'm not going to argue with that. And yeah, I spent the whole of the winter on a farm next to the beach. Every day I'd be in the water swimming with stingrays, with barracudas, and had a great time. And then I came back to London 6 weeks ago to the reality of oncology and back to the cancer wards to have scans and tests and urology wards. But for that time out there, I almost see it as I went there to disconnect to connect. That was my why for Jamaica. It was to disconnect from technology, disconnect from everything, but to really connect with myself. So to live life where my feet were. That was my philosophy for that trip, to literally be where my feet are. And not to get caught up in the world of technology or living someone else's life through a screen. It was very much about just being present.
David, that's wonderful. I'm so glad that you spent a couple of months literally doing that. It just sounds almost so idyllic, to the extent of all of us probably sitting in the other side of the world, kind of dealing with what we had to in their lockdown. Another thing, what a great value of a great partner to be by your side, to actually say, hey, we're off, and I think that's brilliant. I'd love to ask, how you see and how you're able to have the dynamics that play out in your personal life as a consequence of this, but we'll come on to that. I've perhaps got a slightly more deeper question, if I may, and I don't know if I'm going to phrase this right, so forgive me if I don't. But coming back to your first thought, where you said chasing gold medals almost felt ludicrous at the point where you were sitting on cancer wards, and that's where you felt that you were living life. And when you're talking about the Olympian side of things, it was almost you said you forgot to be present in that moment, and there was never a moment where you felt more so alive when you were going through certain treatments. And I just wonder if you've got any reflections now about what you think it is to be alive, and what are some of those thoughts? Because I think all of us, a lot of the time, are going through this almost forgetting to be present moments in the stress and strains of our lives. And I'd just love to think and hear about how you think, what is it really like to feel like you are alive or to be living? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rich, and that we could go for 2 hours just on that. I think, for me to be alive, there's quite a few things. It's almost to be no mind. And I think in a lot of ways it's to realize that you're not your thoughts. And I think as human beings, we spend a lot of time, if not most of our time, in our heads. So we're either living in the future, which can surround us with fear and anxiety and what ifs, or we're living in the past. And in the past, if we're human and we've lived along, we've probably experienced some form of trauma. We've probably experienced loss. We've probably all experienced some sort of form of an event in our life that's hurt us. So we can live in the past with some form of trauma, and that keeps us locked in the past. If something bad has happened to us, on Saturday night, I was the victim of an attack almost in my own hallway in my house in London. And that affected my whole physiology, my whole biology, that actually even today I'm still talking about it, where actually if I really reframe it, it's now just a little electrical impulse in a memory in my brain. And if I give it power, that impulse will become stronger, it will grow more, and it'll change my whole physiology. So I need to change my narrative with that experience in that situation and actually almost let that memory die. So I think the problem is that the unconscious and subconscious mind are so powerful that they actually hijack us, and we spend a huge amount of time in there. We're not really aware of that inner voice and that inner narrative about how we see situations, how we interpret things that are said to us, all this information that's coming in constantly, millions of bits of information a minute are coming into our bodies via our senses. And actually, what's that doing to our mind? So I think to be fully alive is to actually be in the now, and it's to be present in the now. But I think that the greatest challenge to mankind is to actually be in the now, because even as we sit here, there's a part of our brains that's thinking, okay, I've got this meeting today, I've got this later on. You might be sitting looking at your phone and multitasking at the same time as listening to this. That's not being in the now. That's getting your distraction pulled. You're getting pulled to other places. You're getting pulled to a future that doesn't even exist. And this is the danger with Olympic sport and with lots of things. And I'm not saying we can't have goals and targets and visions. I think that's very, very important. It's something that got me from paralysis to walking again, was having goals and having visions. But it's like if you go to climb Everest, all everyone wants to do is reach the summit, and they actually forget how beautiful the journey is to the summit. And they get so disconnected from every step and every breath that they're taking, because all they want to reach is the top. And that's your ego mind, that's your egoic mind driving that. You know, we got to achieve this, we got to be on the Olympic podium, we got to get the promotion, we got to have the better car, all these things to, you know, to have more, to be more. And I think that ultimately all we have is the moment we're in right now. That's it. There is no past. No one lives in. I think if you can show me someone who's lived in the past and lived in the future, then that would be a breakthrough in the world of physics and in science. But we only live in the moment. So all we can really influence is the now. And I believe if you can show up 100% to the now and do everything you need to do, if it's aligned with your values, your goals, your visions, then the future kind of takes care of itself. But the danger we do as human beings is, and especially with cancer, it's very easy to live. And I really have to work on this. This is the biggest work I do is on myself, the inner work. Like, we can do all the outer stuff, and I think some people forget to do the inner work. And my attention now is very much about the inner work, because it would be very easy to live for every scan and be like, well, what if my tumor comes back? I feel a little bit of pain. What if I get cancer again? What if I die? All this voice is going on in my head all the time. So I need to turn that volume down and be present and find ways of being present.
If all we have is the moment we're in, life's pretty good, because I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, that's the thing. That is ultimately the, unless you're suffering, unless you're in a real bad place, usually the moment we're in is a pretty good place to be. The reason we don't experience that is because usually we're elsewhere.
Yeah. Just when I was having that thought, I'm thinking, you know, we've got a couple of meetings coming up later today. They might be stressful. And then it's actually a conscious thought to actively pull yourself back in. Now then, the other person I've heard speak very, very powerfully about being in the present is Johnny Wilkinson. So Johnny Wilkinson achieved his boyhood dream, almost single-handedly won the Rugby World Cup. When asked, how did he feel at that moment of the final whistle? He said he felt nothing. He felt empty. Because, you know, what's next? And he never allowed himself to enjoy it. So the slight contradiction in what you've said is that, you know, seeking gold is ludicrous, but let's not forget you have won Paralympic gold. So what did it feel like in that moment for you at that amazing time?
I think for me, because I'd come through one cancer bout, I had a spinal stroke 2 years before the games. I had a spinal stroke and the tumor, and I actually had about an hour left to live. So I really had to fight for my life. And I woke up 2 years from the games lying paralyzed from the neck down in a hospital bed. So I had to go from that paralysis, the cancer diagnoses, the really trying to fight for my life, all the way through all the rehabilitation, which was horrendous, and then onto that start line. So in a way, I'd started that inner journey as well. So it wasn't just about the outer stuff. I didn't fully understand it, and I probably couldn't really talk about it in a way that people could really understand. But I'd already started that journey. So when I crossed that finish line, it was a moment of relief. I was like, thank God that is over. And it was also, well, I've had my cancer diagnosis now. I've been all through this. I'm going to close this chapter and just get on with the rest of my life now. But for me, it was a relief, and it was also like almost like a kind of outer body experience. But I was present. I did enjoy it. I did savor it. It feels like if I talk about it, I can feel it like it's happened now. So I think I was very fortunate to have gone from the journey of the cancer and the spinal stroke to that start line, because it really made me appreciate that whole journey. I think even though I couldn't relay that information quite at that moment, I'd learned a lot. So again, it was great. There was moments of emptiness after it, like 2-3 months after, there was like this, like, well, what happened? But what I realized, I was very connected to my values. I knew what I wanted to do in life, and I knew also that the medal wasn't everything. And it's easy to say when you have a medal that it's not everything, but again, it's gone now. It's past. It's in the past, and okay, it's shaped a lot of my future, but it is just something that has happened. It's not who I am. It's not what I want to be defined by. And that's where people like Roger Bannister really, for me, is someone who really inspires, if it's the right word, who broke the 4-minute mile, but actually said that his greatest accomplishments was what he gave to the world of neuroscience and medically. And actually, we all see him as the man who broke the 4-minute mile, but actually, for his proudest moment was actually his medical work, because he actually gave so much to other people. And even though the 4-minute mile has given huge amounts to everyone around the world, and it still does today, in his own eyes, that he was more attached to his medical world.
David, it's funny when you talked about a couple of months after you felt a sense of emptiness. I just recall this moment when we were talking to Jack Green, where he said, pinnacle of the moment in London, and then literally a few days after, he was on a train, and nobody knew, almost nobody cared, sort of thing. And it just felt like such a contrast between the elation of that moment versus the reality of actually, hey, we're back.
Yeah, and I struggled massively with that, and that was it was a real awakening to me about humanity, about the what drives humans, and this, because you win this medal, you've got this tracksuit on. When you've got the tracksuit on, everyone identifies with the tracksuit. So you're on a high, you're in Buckingham Palace, you're all these different dinners and awards, and everyone wants to see the medal. There's probably over 10,000 people held my medal, and all these different events and everything. And then, yes, you're on a train in a normal jumper going home, and then 2 weeks later, you're back at Buckingham Palace, and then you're on a tube going home, and you're constantly up and down, up and down, up and down. So you have these huge highs and these massive lows. And this is where it's so important at that point. I wish I knew now what I knew. I wish then I knew then what I know now, because I think at that point I probably wasn't really connected to my values. I was getting sucked into this external world of this stuff's going to make me happy. If I go to this dinner, I'm going to be really happy because it's going to give me all this other stuff. And I very rarely go to those things anymore, unless it has real meaning for me, and I know that my story can really help people change there. I wouldn't just go for me, where I think in the past I went for me. When I get an invite now, it's not about me. It's about how can this affect other people. So that's really changed for me.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring in a question from Richard. I think it's good timing, Richard. So do you almost need to have been through major trauma or elite sport to learn to live in the present? And I suppose my extension on that would be, for those of us who've been fortunate not to have to, how can we get down that road?
So there's a great book, if anyone's actually read it, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Franco. I actually have his little workbook that I'm working through at the moment, sat right next to me. And in a lot of ways, he says to live is to suffer. And it's just it's in greater magnitudes, you know. So I've gone through, you know, 6 major surgeries, a whole host of things. But, you know, cancer affects 1 in 2 people in the world. They're diagnosed nowadays. So there'll be everyone I know has had some form of suffering at some point. You know, it might be losing a job. It might be, you know, they've had COVID. You know, everyone's gone through something. That's a great question, Richard. Do you have to go through something to learn to live in the present? I don't think you do. I just think you have to become aware of it. And each one of us, how we become aware of that is different. Some of you might be aware of it after our conversation today. This might, you know, move you in a deep way where you might go, you know what, I'm going to go away and I'm actually going to do some inner work about how I become more present. For some of you, you might think, well, this is an inspirational story, but it's not moved me enough to actually go and have a delve into this and go down this rabbit hole of how I become more present. And then for other people, you know, they're sat in front of a doctor and they're told they have 6 months left to live. And that is a huge, huge bus hitting you. And they can leave that way and still not learn how to be present. So it's really, you know, it's a lot down to nurture nature there, and how you've been programmed at that early age, the values that you are. There's a lot of time I ask people, you know, what are your values? What are your guiding principles? What's your philosophy? And most people sometimes look at me and go, I have no idea. So for what I always say to people is the first thing to do before adversity hits you is almost to front load this stuff. So you have your toolkit, you have all your skills, and there's 3 things we can train in life, and it's your craft, your body, and your mind. We're very good at training our craft. We're kind of somewhat lackadaisical training the body sometimes, but how many of us can actually say we actually do the inner work? You know, how often do you sit down with a little notepad and write what's your narrative in your mind? What are you grateful for? You know, what's gone wrong today? How did I react to that situation? How did it really make me feel? And start to peel the layers of onion. It's not going into a whole psychotherapy session with yourself, but it's just becoming a little bit aware. And then it's saying, okay, what are my values? You know, what's my purpose in life? What do I stand for in life? What means the most to me in life? And what's my guiding philosophy in life? Because that's like turning the light on. If not, you're basically going through a dark tunnel with no lights and you have no idea where you're going. You're probably living in the future or you're living in the past and you're just in survival mode. To flourish in life, I think a great place to start is to know who you are. You know, what do you stand for? And then you'll start to realize why people respond the way they respond or react. So I always like to have conversations with people who are willing to explore their beliefs rather than defend their beliefs. You only have to have a conversation about COVID, vaccines, Brexit to know that most people are defending their beliefs. And it's just their beliefs. They're not truths, they're not facts. It's their beliefs. And that's okay. But most people don't know where those beliefs come from. They just feel this way about a certain subject and they're very passionate about it and there's no change in their mind. It's great to understand why you're like that, because what it does is it makes you less responsive. It also means that the stuff that you're exposed to daily in life is not going to have such an effect on you. So if someone challenges your belief and you get really annoyed and you're angry, and then 2 hours later you're still annoyed and then you're telling everyone about, I can't believe they think this, that's in the past. You're not living in the present. So the more aware, it all starts with self-awareness. So the more aware that you can become of your body, your mind, how that affects your physiology, then you can get your physiology to work for you rather than against you. And this is something that just doesn't happen. It takes work. I've been working on this ever since I was paralyzed 4 years ago, and it's still a work in progress. I fell down yesterday and had a bad day, but today I've got my notepad and I'm sitting working on the why behind it. But you know, to answer your question, Richard, I think, you know, if you get very clear on your purpose and your why, and then you start to do some of the work, you know, reading the books like The Power of Now, Man's Search for Meaning, you know, these sort of books start to just bring you a little bit more into a conscious sort of control of your body rather than being running in a subconscious, unconscious world. And if you go out into London as an example, it's like living in the Matrix. You know, people are so switched off to actually what's going on around them. You know, how many people can say if they heard the birds this morning, did you notice the smell of the flowers? Did you even notice every single drop of rain that's fallen? That's awareness. And that's something I do. I can taste and smell the rain. I can hear all the different noises of the birds. That came to me after cancer. But I think that we can have that before adversity. We just need to have conversations with wise people. Learn from the people who have been there, and then if you ever have to go there, you're already ahead of the game.
That's why we do this show. And sideline, David, you and I should start a book club, because Viktor Frankl had a profound impact on me as well. So thank you for that, Richie.
No, look, I mean, it's just what you just said there, David. It's just so powerful. I mean, to front load and be prepared, with the toolkit that you need. It's something that's really struck me. And another thing you just said, I mean, the visualization, a couple of visualizations around the dark tunnel, just really powerful in my mind. And then, of course, the sensations of the small things, perhaps, in every moment, to be really self-aware and acutely self-aware in the moment is just absolutely brilliant. And I know quite a few people who, as you said, the contrast between explore your beliefs versus kind of holding on to them. I mean, that's really, really been great. But David, I want to ask, clearly, there's been a whole load of introspection in your life, and that's been super helpful. But at the same time, I'm sure there's been profound people in your life that have made a major impact in you and on you, and the ability to kind of continue on, and I just wanted to think about or ask around the power of relationships to the way that you've been able to respond to some of these major challenges that you faced.
Well, I think, we're all in relationships. The most important relationship is that with ourselves. I think when we get to know ourselves, then we can choose external relationships far more better. And I think we all make this mistake that, when we're younger, we want to belong. That's one of the human traits, is we actually want to belong to something. We don't want to be the kid in the school ground who sat on his own with his own lunchbox, and he's not in the cool group, he's not in the nerdy group, he's not in this group. So we all try to find some form of belonging. And through that, we can experience hurt, we can experience trauma, because we actually get, sometimes we're told, well, I don't want to be with you. It could be a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever, say, I'm finished with you, and that's all hurt. And that stays with us. And I think the more we know ourselves, then the more we can heal that, but also we can actually start to choose our friends better. And when we're younger, we have like these 30, 40, 50, Facebook, you might have 5,000 friends, which is absolutely ludicrous. How can you have 5,000 friends? And I say to myself now that if I want to invest in people the way I want them to invest in me, that's a very small amount of people. And I actually drew a circle. Actually, I've got it here in my book, of me in the middle. Who's my real close network? There might only be 3 or 4 people there, and I really invest in them. And then it's work friends, colleagues, and then out from there it's people I know. And each one of them is a different relationship. And again, if I'm very clear on my values and who I am as a person, I know who I can invest in. Also, I know who takes energy from me, and actually who gives me energy. So I always try to surround myself with people who are willing to explore their beliefs, who give energy to me. I know time is finite. One of the only currencies that we can't make back is time. So I want to spend it wisely. And if I go out into the city and I encounter someone who's very negative, who's very pessimistic, who's angry and bitter, that really affects my energy. And I've got to go away and hopefully I bump into somebody who has great energy, and that changes my whole frequency. So with that close network of friends, I've become aware that I want people to be friends with me because of who I am, not what I've got or not what I've done. So I don't want to be friends with people, I'm friends with Dave, he's got a gold medal. I want to be people, I'm friends with Dave because he's a funny, loyal guy. He's got, he's humane, he's humble. This is the person he is, not what he does. And we see this a lot now in the superficial world of social media and parties and clubs where everyone's just friends with each other for their own benefits, and there's no real grounding on what someone's guiding principles are, and we'll know that ourselves. And I think it's really key to differentiate that. And why is that important? It's because I know the people who visited me in my hospital bed, and I know the people who were there at the gold medal. The people who were there at the gold medal are not really there anymore. The people who came to my hospital bed have always been there. So that's a great thing when you go through that sort of adversities. You really get to know who your friends are, and each of them has a different role. If I need a kick up the backside, I know who to call. If I need someone to just give me a hug, I know who to call. And I've invested in that relationship both ways. And that's really important to know, that it's very easy to spread ourselves thin and not really be connected to people. So again, it's knowing yourself, knowing your values, but also starting to know the people around you and what their values are and what they stand for, and then sort of building that network. And that's been crucial for me through the spinal cord injury, to really have that connection.
Well, as ever, the time just whizzes by and we're getting towards the end. So I think this is the last question. You're so focused on the present. I'm really interested to know how you think about the future. And what do you think your legacy, what would you like your legacy to be?
Wow, that's a great question. So I have a vision of where I want to be and the person I want to be. I often think, what would be my legacy? What would I want to be remembered by? And for me, it's to just bring a bit more compassion into the world. As humans, we're pre-programmed to judge. As soon as we see something, we judge. And for me, if I could have any legacy, it would just be to try and be for people to be a bit more awakened, a bit more self-aware, but just come to each day with a bit more compassion. That's ultimately my legacy. That's what I look to the future. I don't look for trying to win world titles or trying to be successful. For me, I look to the future and pray and hope that as a society we become more compassionate. Because ultimately, if we're more compassionate, we're going to find high performance. People mistaken it. People think if we're not, if we're too compassionate, and I'm not going on about woke stuff and all that's not, this is all grounded in neuroscience and research from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, all of these places, that if we can become in a better state ourselves, then we will discover high performance. And to get into those states, compassionate is very important. Compassion for yourself and compassion for others.
Thank you for that, David. And I, you've already made a humongous impact on that goal to achieve, and I'm sure you'll continue to do so.
Thank you.
To say that we had a lovely comment here from Laura Vipon, and so she says that I chased David cycling up a mountain in Scotland a few years ago, and following his journey ever since, and has had a profound impact on me. So it's been brilliant to hear more about his ethos and what drives him.
Oh, thank you so much. And well, I was going to say, I hope you overtook me and said hello when you went past me.
Brilliant. Well, David, so it's come to the point in the show where I just do a little bit of a summary, some of my key takeaways from what you've said, and then I pass over to Mark just for some of his final thoughts before we close.
Yeah.
So if I may, just coming back to some of the key things that really have struck me, and honestly, this conversation has really left a lasting impact on my psyche. And so the first thing that you went on and talked about was the two races in life. And I love that, because all of us are running 2, 3, multiple races, whatever they may be. And I think we forget that often. But, given the cards that you've been dealt, you've been very conscious about those two races. And I think that's really nice to think about. And you also use the phrase, society makes us feel like we need more to be more. And I think that, just even reciting that back just feels very uncomfortable to me. But yet it's certainly something that we're all chasing, and I am chasing that too. So no exceptions here at all. But actually, if I can stop, reflect, and think about that, and actually go, is that ludicrous? Is that ridiculous to think that? Then maybe we're doing something right. I think the health conditions and the traumas that you've been through have really given you some sort of a lens that a lot of us don't necessarily have, to be able to talk about compassion, think about your own mortality, and then that's then led you on to being able to see things in a way, when you talk about this whole attitude of being present. And I love your thought around, past is gone, future's not even been created, so what the hell are we doing in those areas? It's the middle ground here, which is where everything counts. And I love that. You're front loading. You talked about craft, body, and mind, and actually, it's the last one that we all of us particularly don't spend enough time looking after. the other thing was time is finite, which was another one that you talked about, and just then being able to, and if you think about it from that concept, if everyone knew the date they were going to die, then we would look at living each day very differently. And one of the things that you've clearly said is about your friends' relationships and how you view people, and where you spend your time on that basis. So it's just been a incredible conversation, a very visual conversation for me, quite honestly. And you've left quite a few different things sparking in my mind as we leave this. So thank you, David. It's been a real
Thank you. Thank you, Richie.
Richie, I've just had a little bit of a technical wobble there. Can you still hear me?
I can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what happened on my screen, but if as long as you can hear me. Yeah. I mean, Richie, you did a great job there. Just a couple of things that caught me as well. At some level, chasing gold is ludicrous. What is success? Being values based and flourishing. Be alive. All we have is the moment we're in. So many great lessons. And I loved your metaphor with COVID and paralysis. That really struck a chord. But I think most of all, of everything you've said, it's the fact that you need to work on yourself to be present. It requires real work. That makes me want to be committed to be better at being present, in fairness. So I've loved this, David. I think you've been a stellar guest. So much richness. I know the people watching now and the people on playback will have got a huge amount from it. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you on behalf of myself and Richie and everybody.
No, thank you guys. It's been great. It's been great to be on and share some of my experiences. And I just wish everyone, the best of life. Be in the now and go out and enjoy life. This is not a dress rehearsal. We only get one chance at this, and we want to live it to the fullest.
100%. Well, a great way to close. Thank you, everybody who's tuned in. Next Friday, just a headline, we've got Matthew Syed coming on, 8 a.m. UK time. Most people will know Matthew was an Olympian playing the sport of table tennis, but has now converted that into being a presenter, a journalist, a speaker, an author. Has written the books Bounce and Rebel Ideas. He'll come and talk about growth mindset and diversity. So please tune in next week and tell everyone about it. But for now, thank you again, David. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and everyone have a great weekend.
Thank you.